Good morning, everyone. I'm Joy Tan, the Senior Standards Manager for Digital Technologies, and on behalf of BSI, it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on the Digital Product Passport, the Road to Circularity Compliance. The DPP is a transformative tool at the heart of the circular economy and sustainable digital innovation. Your presence today signals a shared recognition of the need for greater transparency, accountability, and sustainability in the modern economy. Before we kick off, I'd like to run through some housekeeping rules. If we could go on to the next slide. So please note that this is a listen-only webinar. Attendees' microphones and cameras will be switched off. Please submit questions along the way by using the question button on the top right-hand of the screen. Your questions will be addressed after the presentations. For any technical issues, you can report them through the same question box. A link to the webinar recording will be provided upon completion of the feedback survey after this webinar. And finally, to learn more about BSI's upcoming events, do scan this QR code. And moving on to the next slide. This will be the lineup of today's topics as such. And moving on. So as many of you know, the DPP is not just another digital tool. It's a strategic enabler. By embedding standardized, accessible data into products across their life cycles, DPPs empower manufacturers, consumers, and regulators alike to make more informed and responsible decisions. With regulations such as the EU's Ecodesign for Sustainable Product Regulation on the horizon, the need to understand and implement DPPs is more urgent than ever. From materials sourcing to end-of-life recycling, DPPs represent an opportunity to rethink our approach to product life cycles and to accelerate the transition towards a truly circular and data-driven economy. Today's webinar will explore both the background context and essence of DPPs. We will hear from a diverse lineup of speakers, industry practitioners, standards makers, and innovators who will share insights, practical use cases, and the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. Before we dive in, I encourage you to engage actively, ask questions, share thoughts in the chat. And this is how the discussions will then move from vision to action. With that, let's get started and extend a warm welcome to our first speaker, Mr. Martin Charter, the Director of the Center for Sustainable Design, University for the Creative Art. Martin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Joy. What I'm going to do in 10 minutes is to give a bit of an overview of the context to DPP before I pass over to Sophie at BSI. Next slide, please. And what I should say is that I also, I'm chair of the CED1 Circular Economy Committee at BSI, so we welcome any further engagement and interest in the circular economy aspects through that particular committee and subcommittees. So sitting behind Digital Product Passport is ESPR, Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulations, which is a significant piece of framework legislation from the Commission. Next slide, please. Essentially, the Commission's goal through the ESPR is to expand thinking around sustainability and circularity of products from its initial focus around particularly energy-related products now to potentially all products in all sectors. So it's really a substantial piece of framework legislation. Next slide, please. And within this framework legislation, there is, a set of core aims which, embed circularity, so moving away from linear to circular economies, expanding EU-wide rules around product circularity, engaging consumers more in the issues, and a range of other sort of key points, including regulations. Next slide, please. So within the ESPR as a framework regulation, or is essentially 5 core areas. So it's a setting up of regulations, product-based regulations that are going to sort of drive product circularity, and the initial 2 sectors that are being focused are on our textiles, clothing, and iron and steel. And there's a process in development there that I'll mention just in a short while. The next element is the digital product passport. Again, we'll go into that in more detail. And there are other key elements, a ban of destruction of unsold goods that's particularly relevant for the clothing and fashion sector that is now potentially going to be impacted by a lot of new regulations. Also, green public procurement is back on the agenda, and there is another area there on substances of concern. So it's a framework regulation. Within it, there are different elements. Next slide, please. So essentially, within the first part of this, as I highlight, the Commission is looking at product-based regulations, and what we are seeing at the moment within the so-called JRC, within the Commission, they are working on the pre-development of the regulations, of the regulation for clothing, textiles, and separately on iron and steel. So there's a process, preparatory studies and work. There is then a process whereby this is then reviewed by something called the Ecodesign Forum within the Commission. That is a group of experts and stakeholders coming from multiple sectors and multiple areas. So they have a sort of process to comment on this, and then eventually there will be regulation that will come out of this. Next slide, please. And as I understand it, there will be consultative processes, during the process. So I think for time, I won't go into the detail of this, but essentially this forum is there as a group of sort of third-party experts to review, legislative developments, the product-based legislative developments, and then we'll provide the feedback back to the Commission. So they revised this from an eco-design forum focused mainly on energy-related products linked to the previous eco-design directive, and now they're sort of broadening out the sort of membership of this. This also goes in line with 2 new expert groups that have been set up within CEN, on eco-design and circular economy, and for my sins, I'm the UK expert involved in that. So we've got UK has a sort of hand in the game, not to feed into the process. So next slide, please. So within the regulatory elements of this, there are 2 types of requirements. There's performance requirements, sort of a higher level. There are performance requirements, and there are information requirements. Next slide, please. So the information requirements, linked to a number of different areas, but particularly key in that area is digital product passport, which we'll hear more about in a short while. So there's a range of information requirements that will flow from the different aspects of the legislation. There are also importantly performance requirements that will be aligned to each product category that regulations or delegated acts evolve from. And again, highlighting the first 2 areas in development are clothing and textiles and iron and steel. Next slide, please. So unlike the Ecodesign directive related to energy-related products that was primarily focused on reducing energy consumption of products, the Commission have expanded the potential area that they might select product requirements to about, I think it's about 15 here, 15 areas. And as I understand it, for each product-based regulation, they will highlight specific areas of performance that relate to that product category. So, for example, those performance categories may be quantitative or qualitative, and for example, those criteria or requirements set for clothing and textiles will be different from iron and steel, because the sort of impacts and issues will be different in different product categories. And although I'm highlighting those two categories, what the Commission have left it open within the framework directives is for potential regulations in all products, all areas. There are other sort of the next level of regulations or potential regulations have already been highlighted in areas like furniture, for example. But one of the key things that they've highlighted here is that repairability will be a cross-cutting, requirement area across all product categories. And there is some slightly confusing elements there that talk about recycled content in the energy related products. So for me, that's not a horizontal area, that's quite specific to that sector. So there's still, some of these elements, in my opinion, at least, to be ironed out. Next slide, please. So as I highlighted, the Commission went through a major piece of evaluation across multiple sectors, and based on a whole set of different criteria, they chose textiles and iron and steel as the first categories to start to work on. Next slide, please. And what is now happening is that, as I mentioned earlier, for textiles, for example, there is preparatory work on those regulations going in within the JRC. They have, I won't read this out, they've highlighted various categories of clothing in scope and out of scope. But this is a very detailed process they're going through with a variety of stages. So next slide, please. So they have the preparatory study is sort of targeted to be completed in 2025, with some environmental and economic assessment. In 2026, there will be an impact assessment of different design options for the, by design, I mean the sort of shaping of the regulations for the delegated acts. And this is again specifically for textiles and clothing, with a view to adoption in 2027, with an 18-month process for member states to bring into bring into law at a national level. It's unclear at the moment if there will be, for example, similar legislation in the UK, or UK will follow what's going on in Brussels. Next slide, please. So an important document is the ESPR and Energy Labelling Working Plan that was recently published, that focuses on 2025 to 2030, and I think you can sort of, if you want the details of that, I would just essentially Google that. I won't go into the detail of this for time because time's running out. So next slide, please. So again, this is a slide that shows some of the criteria and timings for the regulations that I previously mentioned. So there are other sectors in both the final products and intermediate products categories. Next slide, please. There are a series of exclusions as we understand it. So detergents, paints, lubricants, footwear was discussed as being in, and then it seems to have been out in the short term. But I think a separate study has been commissioned on footwear and also chemicals, although of course under ESPR one does have the area substances of concern, but the precise details of that are still at least unclear to me. Next slide, please. So digital product passport is one of the key components of Ecodesign for Sustainable Products regulations. Next slide, please. And I think the key point here is I'd like to bring out sort of a couple of key points here. So the Commission has still not defined clearly what is going to be in a digital product passport. However, there is a very, very active SEN group looking at the information architecture that Sophie will cover. So the Commission has not defined what is in a digital product passport. So any consultant or other person who tries to suggest that they have a black box or software package to enable you as a company to comply with this is incorrect. The Commission have also just finished a consultation where they have been looking at the whole requirements for suppliers of DPP services. The key point here, just in concluding, is that as highlighted in the working plan, that there will be digital product passport related information and regulation within those product based regulations. So within textiles and steel, there will be specific aspects or requirements linked to digital product passports. Going back to the first point about what is in a digital product passport, there is delays from the Commission on that. As I understand it, that has been delayed in terms of that announcement to 2026. And the last slide, please. So really, it's the Wild West out there in terms of digital product passports. There's a series of standardization activity going on. There are many companies claiming they have digital product passport services, and there are even companies claiming they have a digital product passport. Certainly nobody can claim that at this stage in relation to EC digital product passport. And I think the whole area needs much clearer communication. So be wary of suppliers and consultants coming to you with black box solutions in the area until the details have been finalized by the Commission. So thank you very much. And I will pass across to Sophie at BSI, who's going to talk more about the standardization developments in the area.
Sophie, you're on mute.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Sophie Erskine. I'm Standards Development Manager at BSI, and I'm the Committee Manager for the BSI Business Committee. And I'm really delighted to be here this morning to speak to you about the DPP standards landscape in Europe and internationally. Next slide, please. So BSI is the UK's national standards body. So we are incorporated by Royal Charter, and we are responsible independently for preparing British standards and for coordinating the input of UK experts into international and European standards committees. So BSI has a memorandum of understanding with the UK government, and the MOU recognises BSI's status as a UK member of international and European standards organisations, ISO, IEC and CEN-CENELEC respectively. And as the UK's national standards body, we are here to ensure that all voices are heard in the development of standards needed by UK stakeholders. And we are here to ensure that UK stakeholders can influence the standards that matter to them. Next slide, please. So the digital product passport. So I have been managing the BSI e-business committee, which is responsible for the UK input into the standards landscape in Europe and internationally. Next slide, please. So I have here a generic description of a digital product passport, which is from the Surpass project website, which was funded by the European Commission to do some research into digital product passports to support the implementation of them. So a digital product passport is a structured collection of product-related, machine-readable data with a predefined scope and agreed data management and access rights, which is conveyed through a unique product identifier that is accessible via electronic means through a data carrier. And here we have a picture of a man in a supermarket looking at some kind of data carrier and scanning it with his phone and perhaps making a decision about whether or not he's going to buy that based on all that information that is available on the data carrier. Next slide, please. So let's talk about European DPP standards. So the European DPP standards will be harmonized standards. They will support the ESPR with the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products Regulation, and they will be cited in the OJEU, the official journal of the European Union, under the ESPR, and they will be needed for all goods, for goods in priority product groups being sold into Europe. Next slide, please. So the EU digital product passport, so that, as Martin has already sort of made reference to, the ESPR will introduce a digital product passport, a digital identity card for products, components and materials, which will store relevant information to support product sustainability, promote their circularity and strengthen legal compliance. And the information will be accessible electronically, making it easier for consumers, manufacturers and authorities to make more informed decisions related to sustainability, circularity and regulatory compliance. It will allow customs authorities to perform automatic checks on the existence and authenticity of the DPPs of imported products. And all this information is taken from the European Commission's public website, where they have a whole load of information about the ESPR and its implementation. There's a link there in the slides. Next slide, please. So I first got involved in this when so the European Commission requested CEN-CENELEC to develop standards on the digital product passport to support the implementation of the ESPR. So in May 2023, the European Commission circulated the first draft standardization request on DPP system. At that time, it was just DPP system. It's since become system and framework. M604 is the number of the standards request, and they request harmonized standards to be developed in these areas, these cross-cutting areas: unique identifiers, data carriers, links between physical product and digital representation, access rights management, interoperability, data authentication and data security. So all these standards that the Commission have requested to be developed to support the digital product passport are non-sector specific. It is a system and framework for digital product passports. And in April 2024, as a response to this standards request, CEN-CENELEC accepted the standards request. And as a consequence, CEN-CENELEC are now contracted to deliver the digital product passport standards in line with the deadlines in the standards request. And this work has been allocated to CEN-CENELEC JTC 24. Next slide, please. So CEN-CENELEC JTC 24 Digital Product Passport Framework and System was formed in Q3 of 2023 in response to the standards request, and work is underway to develop European standards to support the implementation of the EU DPP. So all these standards will give you a means to produce DPPs that are acceptable to the European Union for goods in priority groups to be sold into Europe. So then, as I said, once more, it's really important. All the JTC 24 standards are non-sector specific. And as Martin has already said, the data that is the product data to be included in those standards will be specified later by delegated acts under the ESPR for different product groups. So the standards are being developed at pace because the EU DPP will be required by law for some products like iron and steel, such as soon as 2026. And as Martin has already said, priority product groups and indicative timelines have now been specified in the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products and Energy Labelling Working Plan 2025. And there's a link in that slide to the working plan. If you want to read that, that's where all the information is. Okay, next slide, please. So, as I said, Sensenlec have been working at pace because they have very strict deadlines to produce these standards by, and they have now circulated drafts for public comment. So this is your opportunity as members of the public to view these standards. You can view them on the BSI Standards Development Portal, and you can comment if you're a stakeholder and you want to review these drafts and share comments on how you think these are going to be implementable in practice for you. Or your stakeholders, you can click on these links or scan these QR codes and they will take you straight to the BSI Standards Development Portal where all members of the public can comment on these standards. And as you can see, the titles relate very, very closely to the previous slide where I listed all the sort of components that the European Commission requested for their standards. So we've got unique identifiers, data carriers, data exchange, APIs, system interoperability, data storage. So these all link to the standards request from the European Commission. Next slide, please. And there's two more that are not quite ready. They're slightly behind, but we envisage that they will be available for public comment in October, November. So that's access rights management and data authentication. So those two standards, which also link to the standards request, will be available for public comment in the autumn, early autumn, late autumn. Okay, next slide, please. So, as I said, I manage the BSI e-Business Committee, which is responsible for the UK input into Sensenlec JTC 24. So, as a member of Sensenlec, BSI is a member of Sensenlec, and under the terms of its membership, BSI has to make all European standards available as British standards. So, and BSI allocated the responsibility for the UK input into the Sensenlec JTC 24 Digital Product Passport standards to ISD 47-3 e-Business. And we have raised awareness with all potentially impacted stakeholders in the UK, and we invited all BSI committees working on priority products to nominate experts to join ISD 47-3. And if anyone on this webinar would like to join the ISD 47-3 committee and participate more closely, you are very welcome to do so. More on that later. Next slide, please. So, UK input into Sensenlec JTC 24. We have experts under all these areas. So we've got an expert from the Department for Business and Trade. We've got data experts, cross-border trade, big data, experts on legal compliant, post-market compliance. And then we've got experts from all these priority product groups: mattresses, ICT products and electronics, iron and steel, energy-related products, aluminium, furniture. We could do with some more experts for textiles and apparel and tyres. And then the DPP will also enable other EU regulations such as the battery regulation, construction products, and the toys regulation. So we currently have experts from all those areas, but as I say, more people are welcome, anyone who's going to be impacted. Next slide, please. So ISD 47-3 has sent a UK delegation to all Sensenlec JTC 24 plenary meetings, and we have on the webinar Patricia Massey, who's a rep for BEMA, and Eamon Nayland, who's a rep for the Construction Products Association, have been part of the delegation, along with Sue Probert, who I'm going to hand over to very shortly. And we have experts inputting into standards on unique identifiers, data carriers, security and interoperability framework. So we've pretty much covered all the different components of the DPP, not entirely, but we have a fairly broad sort of range of expertise in the UK delegation. And we will be meeting in early September, and we will be collating all the comments that we have received from the drafts of public comment, which I just signposted a couple of slides ago. So if you do go on and put your comments into those drafts, we will be meeting, we will be going through all the comments, and we will be collating them and including them as part of the UK position. So your comments will get noted. So please do log on and comment on the BSI Standards Development Portal. Next slide, please. So very briefly, not only are there European standards, but we also have some international standards which have been proposed. Next slide, please. So in September 2024, the IEEE began work on an IEEE international standard on digital product passport, reference architecture and technical requirements. And this was a proposal from China. And in February 2025, ISO TC 154 and UNECE held a kickoff meeting for another international standard on digital product passport, overview and fundamentals. And this was another proposal from China. And ISD 47-3, the BSI Business Committee, is also the UK mirror group to ISO TC 154. So as you can see, it's a very busy space, standards on digital product passport. Next slide, please. So conclusions. Well, to sell products that are covered by the ESPR and other EU regulations into Europe, manufacturers will need to provide DPPs that are acceptable to the European Commission, and Sensenelec JTC24 standards, which are will be cited in the OJEU under the ESPR. They will provide a means to produce digital product passports, EU digital product passports, which will be acceptable to the European Commission for goods in priority product groups to be sold into the European Union. And Sensenelec JTC24, ISO UNECE, IEEE and ISO IEC are all working on digital product passports, and there is a potential that they will overlap. So there is a clear risk that the standards will conflict. And if different standards are required in different regions internationally, this could introduce an extra cost to manufacturers and suppliers. So ISD 47-3, the BSI Business Committee, is the UK mirror group to all those ISO and Sensenelec groups, and we are working very hard to ensure that they are aligned, all these standards are aligned to sort of cut down on the fragmentation of DPP standards in the landscape. We try to align things because we feel that is what is going to serve industry best. Next slide, please. So if you would like to join the BSI Business Committee, stakeholders can become BSI committee members, and there are multiple routes for participation in BSI committees, including by representing a trade association like BEMA or the Construction Products Association, as I just mentioned, or you could represent an academic institution or as an individual expert endorsed by your employer. If you're going to be impacted by these standards, we really want to hear from you, and we want to give you an opportunity to shape them so that they're going to be fit for purpose in the UK, and you can apply to join at this link here. Next slide, please. And now I'd like to hand over to Sue Probert, who is the chair of the BSI committee, BSI Business Committee. So Sue, I'd like to hand over to you now, please.
Thank you, Sophie, and good morning, everybody. I'm very pleased that we do have on the seminar, we have Eamon Naylon and Patricia Massey, who have been very supportive of the work of the committee in this particular area for longer than I have. And I'm hoping that they'll be able to join in the question and answer session at the end of these presentations, as they have a lot of useful information to share. So I'm going to be taking what Sophie has just presented and also the earlier presentation from Martin into a little bit more detail to encourage participation in our work. And also I'll be dealing with the international aspects in more detail, because that is a situation which is very important to the UK, because obviously being out of the EU is still very important, but the international scope is also critical for the EU, for the UK. So next slide, please. So there are there are 4 work groups within JTC 24 that Sophie introduced. We do have participation in these work groups to various extents, depending on the availability of our volunteer efforts. But we have taken as much well, it's taken a lot of time to be involved in these meetings. The results of all the work are definitely out for public review, as Sophie mentioned, and it's really critical and important that if you're interested in this subject, the very first thing you should do right now is get the access to these draft uh, documents and to submit your comments to BSI, to us, so that we can collect them together and report them back to the JTC 24. Okay, there are 8 modules. 2 of them are a little bit behind, as Sophie mentioned, but I think they may even have been released now, but they are behind they will have a later date for comments reviews. And you can get them from the BSI website, and please let us have your comments. Next slide, please. So now I'd like to, or before I move on to the international scene, I would just like to say that although we have priority areas clearly defined by the EU for their first legislation on DPPs, other sectors will be joining. And so all sectors should take a real interest in what's going on at the moment and what standards are defined, because it will be moving on to cover all the sectors over time. So now to move on to the international perspective, I think it was just over a year ago when we had within TC 154, which is an e-business group within ISO, looking at the supply chain in particular and trade facilitation. This has been going for a long time, and I have been representing BSI there as head of delegation for some years. Also, in TC 154, it's actually a group that's worked closely with UNECE and UNCFAC for many years in the electronic data exchange standards for EDIFACT core components and the latest buy, ship, pay supply chain data models. So this request came in originally, as Sophie said, from China. And it was a proposal for a new preliminary work item to look at the framework of DPP systems. And this is what is going to be discussed here. What you have on the screen is the reaction from JTC 24, because obviously, working so hard as we are in JTC 24 for the EU regulation, everyone has an interest in long-term international solutions, but we want to make sure that the work of JTC 24 is brought into any international future work. And so it was discussed at a plenary back in November last year that JTC 24 was discussing what its reaction should be to this new work item. And as you can see here, a global perspective is welcomed, in particular to support global interoperability and enable cost-effective trade from both the value chain and the supply chain aspects. So JTC 24 has indicated support, as long as a clear responsibility of DPP systems on discrete regional levels is recognized, a clear scope defined, and no interference with ongoing standardization. This will be a difficult area to cover, because obviously everyone comes to this with their own work they've already done, and JTC 24 will be mixing with other work coming from other regions and so on. And no preconceived notions. This was the plan. This was the comments that JTC 24 submitted when the preliminary work item was being discussed in TC 154. So next slide, please. Okay, I've introduced a little bit about TC 154. It's been established for more than 50 years, and it has been looking at the international standardization and registration of business and administrative processes and supporting data for all that time, from paper layout standards for international trade through UN EDIFACT for the last 30 years, and now onto core components and data models that can support new ways to exchange data, JSON and APIs, etc. So China provides the Secretariat and the Chair, and it has been a liaison partner with UNECE and the UN CFAC standards for 50 years in those same areas. Next slide, please. So now a brief introduction to UN CFAC itself, which is supported by the UNECE, but it is a global center for the UN for the development of e-business standards for international trade facilitation. And it has partnerships with other UN agencies. Obviously, you see a few on the slide here, and also a very important set of organizations. First of all, the regional links with the EU, with the EEC, and so on. All these areas are important and covered by UNECE. And then we have the international organizations such as GS1, IPCA, the Port Community Systems Association, Protec for dangerous goods, FIATA, freight forwarders, SMDG, where I am right now at a meeting in Hamburg, which is looking at container ship planning and that important sector of maritime freight industry, and DCSA, which is a combination of the shipping lines looking at new technological solutions for exchanging data. And then we also have our wider links with the other international standards bodies, and these will become important in the next slide because IEC and ITU, as well as ISO, are all interested in DPP. So we all have to work together, as I will look at in the next slide. Next slide, please. Okay, so a few years ago, during the COVID times, a more formal arrangement reflecting the long-term liaison between UNECE CFAC and ISO TC 154 was formed into its Joint Working Group 9. And it is within a Joint Working Group 9 that we have a number of projects, including the Electronic Bill of Lading, Maritime Negotiable Bill of Lading, and other interesting projects. But the key project we're talking about today is the preliminary work item 25534-1, and that is called the Digital Product Passport Part 1 Overview and Fundamental Principles. Now, first of all, the Part 1 suggests there's going to be more coming later, so let's see what happens on that. But you can see there are co-leaders from the ISO side and from the UNECE, UN CFAC side. And I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Recent activity, there was an online event, a passport symposium in the last day of June and the first days of July. And it was concentrating on textiles, batteries, and other strategic sectors with a lot of very good speakers. And all the information is available online for you at the link that I've provided here. And also on the 9th of July, there was a press release from the UNECE Trade Facilitation on the approval at the plenary of UN CFAC last week of Recommendation 49, Transparency at Scale, Fostering Sustainable Value Chains. And again, I give the link there for you to find out more. All of the things I'm discussing are covered by this committee that Sophie is managing for us from BSI, which is covering e-business, a very wide area, of course, e-business and trade facilitation. Next slide, please. So this is a slide that I've recently been provided with, which is a reference to what Martin introduced. It's his slide, but around the outside of it, the project team from ISO TC154 JWG9 have been adding information about what they are covering. And what you can see is that 2 of these things are not in the scope of EU DPP, but all the others are. And this will be available to you afterwards, but it's linking what Martin showed with the EU DPP, what is and is not covered. Next slide, please. And what I'd like to do now is raise some points which could encourage, I hope, some questions from all the participants, which we can deal with in the question and answer session. So, just a fact, SEN and SENELEC standards are adopted as UK standards, as well as standards from ISO, IEC. And the second point is the post-Brexit global view. UK is now in a different position. There are other non-EU SEN, SENELEC members countries, such as Norway and Turkey. And obviously our view is wider than just EU. Just to think about what we feel about how important it is to us as a country, the global view. What is HMG, UK government's vision or visions relating to DPPs? We have tried very hard, the people who are involved in working with JTC 24, to encourage government input. And we have achieved some, but it would be nice to get some wider input, especially from customs, which I come across, mention in a moment, because customs will be involved with DPPs from the supply chain perspective, not just the value chain. Okay, so the EU is stipulating across industry DPP framework from the starting points of the strategic sectors, but how to support different product group requirements. This is something raised very often and something that our colleague Patricia is very, very experienced in getting questions about from her work in the EU, from BEMA, and other organizations she's linked with. And I'd like to highlight again the important point. The DPPs will not just be for value chains. It is very important from the sustainability and circularity aspects, as has been mentioned already, but it's also, they're going to be permeating across the whole supply chain. And when you come to the requirements of the EU, they actually mention there market surveillance and customs, who are recognized as being important supporters of DPPs. And that will be done through the supply chain at borders, border crossings, border releases, where agricultural certificates and CITES, all of these things will include now in the future DPPs more and more as part of the work of managing cross-border movements across borders in the border management in supply chains. And I'd like to ask if there are any other considerations. Maybe while you're listening to our presentations, you're thinking of other considerations that we should have from the EU, from the UK's perspective, and we welcome very much your questions if you can submit them, and we can discuss them in the later session. Thank you very much. I have one more slide, please. One way forward, because there's a lot of discussion now. Should ISO lead the international work? Should IEC lead the international work? You saw Sophie presented a slide showing that IEC have a DPP working group, as well as the ISO one I've mentioned here, and ITU is also interested, and UNECE. But there is a memorandum of understanding that's been around for more than 20 years, and that is possibly a way where those organizations can work together The wording of this slide is a bit strange, but ITU joined something that already existed in 2000, and from then the four organisations have worked together. And my big question is, could this MOU-MG be the international DPP standards coordination body to enable us all to move forward towards international standards? Thank you very much indeed. I will now hand over to Lynn, who will be the first of two speakers talking about sector contextualization. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Sue. Just a very, very brief introduction. I'm Lynn Morgan, as you can see. I'm scheme manager for construction products, working for CARES. CARES is a UCAS accredited certification body, primarily for reinforcing steel, but also for other construction products. We're also a UK approved body for UKCA marking for numerous steel products and precast concrete, and also a UK technical approval body. We work in over 47 countries. Okay, next slide, please. So just imagine standing in front of a beautifully designed building or structure, knowing that every structural element is not only aesthetically pleasing and perfect, but also fully traceable back to its origin and compliant with safety regulations and standards. As engineers and manufacturers, our reputation and the safety of the public depend on our commitment to product compliance. In an age where digital transformation is reshaping industries, the importance of robust compliance and the integrity of the evidence cannot be overstated. Hopefully by the end of the presentation, we'll be able to inspire you to embrace these types of solutions, just to elevate our standards together. So the content of the presentation: what's the chain of custody? Why is it important? How we as CARES are elevating supply chain integrity through traceability. Why standardization and digitalization matter. It says here how CARES complies with the DPP. We don't know where the EU are going with the DPP, so we can't necessarily comply, but what we can say is where we are with our current approach. And finally, conclusions and takeaways at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. What you see on the top left-hand side is the quite convoluted and complex steel industry, typical, whether it's reinforcing steel plate, structural sections. It starts off with a melting of raw materials. Quite a bit of that raw material may well be recycled material from demolition products. It's melted, it's hot rolled, it's then packed, and it then goes to various fabricators. I want to stress the critical importance of traceability in the steel industry, from manufacturing to processing to site, and finally to the structure itself. We need to know what is the chain of custody and why is it important. It refers to the accurate processing of tracking materials through every stage of the supply chain. Sourcing of raw material, production, processing, delivery and installation. And by capturing that journey using these sorts of digital tools, we can ensure the materials are tracked from their origin to the final structure. When the molten steel is cast and rolled, the unique CARES bar marks, as you can see in the top right hand side, are added to each piece of rebar. This enables us and anybody to know which rolling mill has produced this rebar and which country it is from. It is then batched, labelled and delivered to a fabricator. Fabricators will then split that bundle down. They will cut it, they will bend it, they will weld it according to bar schedules that are requested on site. The bar mark is always retained during this process and through to the final construction site. Next slide, please. So why does it matter? I've said iron and steel supply chains, they're complex, they're fragmented. Digital product passports will bring transparency. We'll be able to provide the information on the source, where it was produced, who produced it, the chemical composition, the properties, recycled content, the carbon footprint, GWP, global warming potential. Repairability score maybe not as relevant for reinforcing steel, but certainly recyclability score and end of life is certainly important. DPP data will follow open standards with interoperable formats and machine readable, well laid out and searchable. The key thing is it'll avoid the greenwashing, the falsification, and hopefully support decarbonisation of the iron and steel sector. Next slide, please. So how do we comply with DPP? Next slide. This is one of our solution, or this is our solution. We have a CARES cloud. It's a digital ecosystem using a cloud-based platform and consists of an upstream cloud and a downstream cloud. And all of these can be integrated using complementary apps, which are free to download. We developed the upstream cloud initially for steel mills and for our own assessment team while we undertake our certification work. But it does provide a single source of truth of product test data for the CARES certified steel. The portal also includes functionalities to generate the digital record. And this is important. The downstream was developed for the fabricators, projects and contractors, and it provides further data from the CARES approved fabricators. And again, the portal includes functionalities to generate digital passport and carbon footprint calculations. Next slide, please. So through the CARES upstream cloud and approved steel mills, the product test data and the data is validated according to the relevant standard. In the UK, for reinforcing bar is BS 4449. The test data for each batch or cast is securely stored on the platform. It's a Microsoft Azure platform and provides real-time access to the data. There is complete confidentiality, and the digital record remains the property of the producer and is only allowed to be shared once they allow that to various bodies. But it does enable the steel mills to publish their own CARES digital record to the CARES cloud. Next slide, please. All CARES certification approvals issued after the 1st of January 2020 contained a static QR code. This is our attempt to stop the falsification of certification. When it's scanned via the CARES cloud app, the certified steel manufacturer, their scope of approval, and key dates and certification status can be validated. We also have a static QR code on the product label. We have since developed a dynamic QR code for the product properties data. When the dynamic QR code is again scanned via the upstream app or CARES Auditor app, the source, the chemical and mechanical properties, bar marking and carbon footprint can be validated on the CARES digital record. At the moment, the data is only shared with third parties with the consent of the steel manufacturer. Next slide, please. Similarly, the downstream, it helps CARES approved fabricators, projects and contractors in the supply chain to confirm the validity and scope of approval on the certificate. You scan the static and the dynamic QR code on the labels and delivery notes to validate the origin, standard and properties of the materials used. The downstream cloud has 3 traceability levels and allocations at source, batch and bundle level. It allows traders and fabricators to receive reinforcement and assign to the next stakeholder in the value chain. The portal includes functionalities to generate digital passport and carbon footprint calculations. Next slide, please. This is just an example. Consider material initially supplied from Turkey, maybe a Turkish reinforcing bar producer, who then supplies to a port, which is then distributed maybe via a trader to various fabricators within the UK for various projects. All of this is traceable. Its full route, its full map, its full production supply is traceable. Each backed up by the certificate of approvals and any corresponding EPDs. Next slide, please. This is just one example where we're talking to an end user, we've worked closely with HS2 Phase 1 Works team. It's been delivered by the Houston Integrated Project team, including Mace Dragados joint venture. The cloud-based platform provided an easy-to-understand digital dashboard to help their project managers and contractors identify the quantities, how the product conforms, and any additional certification approvals for the status of that rebar delivered to site, and could become a key part of the materials passport scheme on future projects. The digital architecture is transferable to other steel and wider construction related products, and it provides an opportunity for the digital transformation of the built environment sector. A secure dashboard does provide this overview of the product conformity approval status. Each bundle of rebar ensures the grade specified and a digital product material passport of the rebar used, together with a quality and responsible sourcing certificate and the EPD of the actual material used. And the final slide, please. Sorry, what I forgot to mention is when you get a copy of these slides, you will actually see a link to give you more information on the the HS2 Houston project. So in conclusion, supply chain traceability allows us to monitor and track the chain of custody from the source to the site to the finished structure. It provides invaluable insights into the product's origins, processes, and the handlers throughout the process route. Today's consumers are increasingly aware of the environment and ethical impacts of their purchasing decisions. They are willing to pay for more sustainable options, and companies are also seeking to procure materials that are ethical, sustainable, and compliant with regulatory standards. Companies cannot make sustainability claims without concrete evidence. Chain of custody models are essential in validating these claims, collecting information on the source of the materials and providing visibility across the value chain. The transparency holds all supply chain actors accountable, establishes trust, credibility, and compliance with regulations. In conclusion, traceability in the steel supply chain is not just a regulatory requirement, but a cornerstone of sustainable and ethical business practice. Thank you. Next, please. And if I can just pass on to the next presenter, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you to BSI for having me today. I am Ava Kinney-Colwell, the Compliance Manager at the UK Fashion and Textiles Association. I'll be giving a brief overview of the apparel and textile sector's readiness and challenges for the Ecodesign for Sustainable Products regulation and how UKFT is supporting the industry through this transition. Next slide, please. I am conscious of time, so briefly mention UKFT is the largest network for fashion and textiles in the UK. We bring together brands, designers, manufacturers, suppliers, educators and retailers to promote their businesses and our industry both in the UK and throughout the world. I will just mention the care symbols. These care symbols on this slide are trademarked and a license is required to use them. If there's any businesses listening today that would like to discuss that with me, they're very welcome to email me after this webinar. Next slide, please. So to give you a sense of scale, the UK fashion and textile industry contributes to 62 billion in GVA to the economy, supports 1.3 million jobs and generates 23 billion in tax revenue. That's 1 in every 25 jobs in the UK and £1 in every £30 of HMRC's tax take. So it's a vital sector in the UK and one that is facing significant regulatory change globally. And these figures are taken from 2024. Next slide, please. So with regards to the implementation of the Digital Product Passport under the ESPR, the fashion and textile sector is facing a number of readiness challenges, particularly because the delegated acts for apparel and textiles have not yet been published. It is my role at UKFT to advise how to be compliant with legislation. And until the DPP Delegated Act is written, it is not possible for me to advise businesses how to comply. So this uncertainty is making it difficult for businesses to prepare effectively, especially due to the amount of misinformation available at this moment in time. For data collection and traceability, many businesses are unsure what data will be required, how far back in the supply chain they will need to go, and whether they will be required to verify that data. For SMEs, this is especially a concern as they often rely on their suppliers to source textiles and components and might not have full visibility or direct relationships with all suppliers in their supply chain. Limited visibility across multi-tiered supply chains can be a concern for all sized businesses in our sector. Fashion supply chains are complex and often global. Brands might know their tier 1 suppliers, but visibility beyond that into raw materials, dyeing, finishing is often limited. This lack of transparency could make it difficult to meet traceability expectations. Cost and resource implications are a growing concern, particularly for SMEs. Implementing systems to collect, manage and report this data requires investment, both in technology and people. For many SMEs, this is a significant financial and administrative burden, which involves onboarding a third-party company to support with compliance. There are also technology and infrastructure gaps, as many businesses don't yet have the digital infrastructure to support DPP implementation. They may be using spreadsheets or systems that aren't as technically advanced as emerging DPP platforms. And without external support, they may find compliance more difficult or even impossible. Next slide, please. At UKFT, we've been actively engaging with our members to understand their concerns and their priorities. This is an overview of some of the requirements our members are seeking. So clarity on regulatory timelines. Businesses do need to know when specific requirements will enter into force and become effective so that they can plan and budget accordingly. Right now, the lack of a clear timeline from the European Commission is creating uncertainty. This is especially as we have seen many withdrawals, postponements and delayed simplifications significantly over the last 12 months. So using the DPP Delegated Act as an example, the DPP DA or Delegated Act has been pushed back from 2026 to mid-2028 just in the last 12 months. Outlining of derogations under the delegated acts. Members do want to understand if there will be any exemptions or any phased in requirements, especially for SMEs or for specific product categories. This will help them assess their risk and readiness. For sector-specific guidance on anticipated DPP content, generic guidance might not be clear enough for the sector. There is a gap with regards to what misinformation is available online versus what the DPPDA has confirmed to be included, which at the moment is nothing, as at this stage it has not been written yet. Our members are asking for tailored information that reflects the contents of fashion and textile production, what data is needed, how to collect it and how to present it. There is a lack of harmonisation across EU member states, so some countries like France are moving ahead with their own national requirements. This does create confusion and increases the compliance burden for UK businesses exporting to multiple EU markets. There is also a lack of regulatory harmonisation globally, which requires businesses to comply with many varying requirements for worldwide distribution. And diverse regulatory requirements creating internal strain. So the combination of the ESPR, Green Claims Directive and other sustainability regulations is placing a heavy burden on internal teams. Many SMEs don't have the capacity to manage multiple overlapping compliance demands and ever-changing compliance requirements. Next slide, please. So how we're responding. At UKFT, we are taking a proactive approach to support the sector through this transition. We actively engage with policymakers in the EU via Eurotex. So we work closely with Eurotex to ensure that delegated acts under the ESPR are practical, proportionate and reflect the needs of the fashion and textile sector. We're advocating for clarity, flexibility and SME-friendly approaches alongside our fellow Eurotex members. Eurotex has also been selected to be part of the Ecodesign Forum, which Martin mentioned earlier on in this webinar, which is part of our ongoing efforts to stay active in this area of legislation. We develop guidance tailored to UK businesses. So we create webinars, guides and resources that break down complex regulatory requirements into manageable steps. We're creating guidance in line with current requirements that remain subject to change as this regulation finalises. We often demystify misinformation on proposed policy to help support and reduce panic in our sector. We host webinars and workshops. We're running regular sessions to raise awareness, share updates and provide a space for businesses to ask questions and learn from each other. We are monitoring pilot projects and digital tools. So we're often monitoring emerging DPP platforms and pilot schemes to identify solutions that could work for UK fashion and textile businesses, although this is currently subject to confirmation of DPP service provider requirements under the ESPR. And again, it has been mentioned that there has been a recent consultation on DPP service providers. We provide one-to-one business support. So for our members who need more tailored support, more tailored help, we offer direct support through our compliance team, outlining which data they should collect to meet their current regulatory obligations, understanding labelling requirements, or preparing for new regulations. I do apologise, I have rushed through that a little bit as I am aware we are running out of time. So I will hand over to Joy to start the Q&A.
Thank you, Ava. Yes, yeah, I'm back on camera. So thank you, speakers, for the extensive sharing. We've now come to the Q&A section of the webinar. Can I invite you to turn on your cameras? Thank you. All right, so we've received a variety of questions, which I've categorized thematically to facilitate this session. But due to time constraints, let's start off with the first three. So the first question from the audience is, I understand that some of the DPP information requirements will be product specific. Do you think there will be horizontal requirements across all product groups? Is there anyone who would like to take the first question? Maybe. Go for it, Martin.
Yeah, I'll take. Yeah. So what has been highlighted related to my presentation is that within the delegated acts, the Commission will choose from 15 different performance requirements, and that will be sort of customized to the different product categories. What they have also stated is that repairability will be a horizontal area, but also confusingly under horizontal, they have highlighted recycled content for electronic products. For me, that's specific, that's not horizontal. So you know, bearing in mind various things the Commission is doing, I think repairability is an area of interest for them. So perhaps I'll leave it like that.
Thank you, Martin. Okay, moving on to the second question. Does the DPP allow for continued confidentiality of business interests and supply chains in industries such as fashion? I think I'll defer to Martin and Eva for this question, if that's possible.
I'll defer to Ava on this.
I am aware, you know, especially in my sector, confidentiality of supply chains has always been a priority. I think it is yet to be seen how much will be visible. I think that's still very much under discussion. I think we are going to see a shift into more transparent supply chains. But in terms of what's in the you know, written text, which will be what we have to comply with, that is yet to be seen. But I would expect we are going to start to see a little bit more of transparency.
Thank you so much. Okay, moving on to the third question because we're running short on time. Is the ISO IEC 22603 Part 1 IT digital representation of product information also being considered as an initial international standard supporting DPP as part of harmonization? Would Sue or Sophie like to take this question?
Maybe you could start, Sophie, and then I could add a comment.
Yeah, so for the EU Digital Product Passport, Senelec JTC24 are developing standards specifically to meet the standards request from the European Commission, and they are considering, they have liaisons with many groups. If I could, I'll take down a note of the identifier and I'll check which standard technical committee is responsible for that one. But I do think they are fairly constrained because they really have to have a complete solution to provide digital product passports that are going to be acceptable to the European Commission. So it might not be possible to use existing standards. And as this is supporting EU regulations, they have a fair amount of agency in that they don't have to use international standards because of the need to support the regulation. Sue, I don't know if you have anything else to add. I'll take a note of that identifier and respond in person to the person who asked.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. I think the IEC work is a very good example of the challenges in achieving an international perspective, as I raised in my short presentation. I think one of the things I've noticed is that a lot of the work of other groups is focused either on value chain, sustainability and circularity, or in some cases supply chain, which is a very different aspect of DPP. What is being proposed by the ISO work in their JWG9 is to actually, in their first part, to describe the framework of all the standards. And I think that would be helpful to understand where we are internationally. And then we'll have to see what happens after that. But yeah, IEC is one of many organizations, even our international organizations, who are busily working out how to do DPP standards. So somehow we have to bring it all together. And maybe from BSI we can support the way forward. Thank you. Good question.
Thank you, Sophie and Sue. Wonderful. Okay, we can now move on to the construction focused questions. So the fourth question is, would iron and steel construction products be considered as part of the ESPR iron and steel, or the recast construction products regulation, both necessitating the DPP passports? Would Lynn be able to respond to this, or Sue?
Lynn, maybe you.
Yeah. I mean, what we're trying to do is to get ourselves ready. We are aware through various committees which we hold, and because of our worldwide presence, we are aware, certainly of what the countries actually want, whether or not they can get everything that they require with regard to the information. But we're absolutely certain that this is top of the priority. And as you said, I think 2026 iron and steel are going to be included. And I would be very surprised if this doesn't become part of the construction products regulations.
Thank you, Lynn. All right, Sue, if I could just invite you to mute. There's a little bit of feedback from your microphone.
Oh, sorry, I will.
Yeah. And if we go on to the fifth question, if product groups under the construction product regulations are required to determine a common life cycle assessment methodology, how can any existing EPD or carbon calculation be considered accurate? Is this something, Lynn, you could advise on?
I'm not sure. I've not actually been involved, as I say, with the EPD calculations as such. One of my colleagues has asked me to present here today, but I can certainly find out, with regard to the EPDs that have been produced, what may need to change. But we're fairly convinced at this moment in time that the EPDs that are in will not require much major work, certainly for the steel industry anyway.
All right, thank you, Lynn. So we'll take that back for further clarification. And if we move on to the sixth question, how will the DPP be applied to reused products? For example, a reused steel beam. I think this one can be open to the floor. If anyone could advise on this, how will the DPP be applied to reused products?
I could probably answer this. Normally within European regulations and many regulations across the world, there are derogations or exemptions for second-hand product. So within the General Product Safety Regulation that the EU introduced in December, for example, second-hand vintage is more vintage and antiques rather than second-hand, but they are exempt. So yeah, it's normally written in terms of reused product or second-hand or vintage or whatever that product might fall under. So there is normally a derogation or exemption.
I just add one other point. Within the framework directive, I believe that there is some let's say discussion around the use of remanufactured products, and there is a misalignment with a lot of the industry definitions, and I think the definitions within standards. So I think in terms of products being placed on the market, whatever they might be, there's a lack of clarity. I think the remanufacturability one is certainly one that I know has popped up, and there are various comments flying from all sorts of directions on this. So, but precisely in terms of reuse products on the market, unclear. I haven't seen any clarification from the Commission on that myself.
To add to what Ava said, I think it's going to become more difficult, Ava, because when you think about vintage market for clothes, you're talking about something that existed before these regulations that we're talking about. But as we move forward, there'll be secondhand coming into the products that are covered by the regulation. And I think then it'll be much more difficult. No answers there, but just the raising a difficulty.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Just sorry.
Sorry, Lynn.
Yeah. I'm just going to add on obviously for the steel industry as such, any sort of you're looking at either reuse or recyclability is probably more relevant for recyclability, because steel that could be reused probably does not have that traceability that you require, so it's safer to send it back for remelting to make a new new component, really.
Brilliant. Thank you, everyone. I think that was a very holistic answer to this question. I'm conscious of the time. I think we've come to the end of our Q&A session. So thank you, speakers, for joining us. And also thank you, participants, for the range of questions that were asked. Is really excellent today. I think, speakers, you can now turn off your cameras if you like. And I'll end off this webinar with some closing remarks. So thank you everyone for joining us today and contributing to such a rich and insightful conversation around the DPP. Over the past hour, we've explored the emerging landscape from multiple perspectives and what to expect from the standardization program. As you can see, the DPP is no longer just a concept, but a tangible requirement and a powerful change enabler. To realize its full potential, collaboration is essential. It will require standards harmonized to the EU regulations, shared data infrastructure, and the commitment of everyone across the value chain. As mentioned, the Senelec JTC 24 Committee on DPP Framework and System has released 6 drafts for public consultation. You are encouraged to submit your comments through the BSI Standards Development Portal by the 19th of August. If you wish to get more directly involved in shaping the standards, do apply to be a standards maker at IST 47-3. So whether you're just beginning to explore DPPs or deep in preparation for it, we hope today's session has equipped you with the knowledge and connections to take your work forward. Before we close, just a few quick steps. A recording of today's webinar and the related materials will be shared with all registrants via email once you've completed the post-event survey. Please provide us suggestions and future topics that you'd like us to cover in the next webinar. And last but not least, continue the conversation and stay connected. Please visit our DPP blog where you will receive the latest updates. So thank you once again for being with us today. We look forward to building a transparent, sustainable, data-driven future. Take care and goodbye for now.